Welcome to Owning the Goal, a podcast that helps you take charge of your sales success. I'm the creator and your host, Brian McFarland. I look forward to sharing insights and inspiration from my 40-plus year sales career as a seller and a sales leader. Like you, I'm more than just a salesperson, which is why this isn't just a podcast about sales. I'll talk about my other passions too, like books, sports, music, and mental health and fitness, and how they all relate to hitting our goals. Because success in sales is success in life. And our episode today is book reviews. We enjoy. Tonight's book is by one of my favorite authors, Harvey McKay, and it's called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. Harvey has written many books. What are his other books? Beware the naked man who offers you his shirt. Finding a job is a job. And dig your well before you're thirsty. So I hope as a listener, you're kind of getting a theme there. If you aren't familiar with Harvey McKay's books, I would really encourage you to enjoy them. I sit to give you the visual element, if you're just listening, of course, of what's around me. And I have my copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People, which we talked about in our last episode. Got a lot of great feedback on that, so thank you so much. I have my gratitude journal always by my side because success in life at this point, I've learned at my young age of 57 years young, is about waking up every day, being alive, being healthy, having people around you that you love and they love you. And if you can start each day that way, you've achieved success in some way or another. And I always want to think that. But as we move in to today's book, Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. So what I want to do first off is bring up a brief anecdote. Before I did this episode, the one you're hearing now, I did a rough cut. And I love listening to a rough cut before I'm going to put it out to you, the listeners, because I value your time so much to make sure that you're getting a quality product because you're giving us your time. So I got in the lift. I was heading to a chiropractic visit, and I'm staring at my 3 candles because 3 is always what I feel a lucky number. So they're shining for you, as well as some lovely incense. I think it's sage, to make the room neutral and bring in wonderful spirits. But I got in the lift. And why I tell this story is it's very representative of the small things one can do in life, whether it's in sales, relationships, parenting, any aspect of life of any human that you interact with, about just doing something extra. So I got in this lift. I had my AirPods in. I was all set to listen to my episode. Got in the lift. The gentleman said, "Brian?" "Yes." "Going to 330 West 58th Street?" "Yes." I said, "Oh, what's your name?" He said, "Steven." "Nice to meet you." And I immediately noticed I was about to press play on my iPhone to listen to the episode, which I'm really excited to do. He had 8 bottles of water, 4 in each of the back of the seats in front of me, that were sitting there clearly, obviously, for any rider to just use or to consume. And I found this incredibly powerful. And I'll tell you why. Because I know you're asking why, Brian. It's just water. But really, is it? And so first, without taking out my AirPods, I said, "Hey, that's really nice that you offer water to your clients that get in the back of the car." And we were at a stoplight, and he turned to me and he said, with the biggest smile in the world, and he said, "You know, Brian," note that he used my name,
a $10 investment on my part, if it brings a smile to you or anyone's face, it's worth every penny. And with that, I removed my AirPods, I put my phone on mute and turned it over, and I knew I was about to begin what would be a wonderful conversation during just a short 20 minutes. We may have Stephen on as a guest because I shared with him the function of the show, and I also then got him with a polite ask to share his story, which was nothing short of incredibly empowering and overwhelmingly positive about some of the things that Stephen went through in his life. And it turns out his Lyft gig is a side gig to his primary gig, which is driving around celebrities of A-level talent and caliber all over New York City. And it's a slow time right now. So he promised me that we're going to keep in touch. I would love him to be a guest. So Stephen, if you're listening, I'll send this episode to you, and I'll tell you right now the impact you had on me right before I'm taping this episode of the Turnaround Artists, because it really meant so much, and you sharing your story was so touching. So it will make sense why as we go through this episode. And you as a listener saying, please make it make sense, Brian. I've tuned in. I've given you my time. So that was my anecdote to start the story. So let's get on to the book. Please do, Brian. Okay. So here we are. So around the time I was given Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, if you tuned into our last episode, and being an angry basketball player at Plainview Kennedy on Long Island, another friend gave me a book, and he said, if you like Dale Carnegie's book, you're going to love this book. And it was Harvey McKay's book that we're talking about today. So the book opens with, as good writing always, as my darling Marisa has taught me, opens up with something that's going to grab you, just like a hit song, to make you keep reading or make you keep listening. And Harvey opens up telling the story of him living in Minnesota and him being a prominent businessman, just a wonderfully ethical and wonderful person, family man, father, husband, business owner, employs a small business, of forming a group to buy the Minnesota Twins when they were potentially leaving town, which would really leave a big part of the town missing a soul. And he had formed a business group to try and buy the Minnesota Twins, and he tells a story there. So that's the start of the book. So it grabs you and it captivates you. And if you want to hear that story, I would suggest you buy the book, or I'll make this offer again. Some people are taking us up on the Dale Carnegie offer I made, and I'll make you another offer. If you email us at hello@theturnaroundartist.org after listening to this show and give me your mailing address, I will send you, at my expense, a paperback copy of Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive as a thank you to you for listening. So take me up on it. And we don't make any money off the show. That's never the point. So we invest in you as a listener. So Harvey forms this group. They try and buy the Twins. It's not important whether he buys them or not. It's important the story of how he got to be where he is. At least that's what we're doing for this episode. So Harvey he was a salesman, a lifelong salesman, and he got an opportunity to buy a business. So what does he do? He buys an envelope manufacturer that was a struggling one that was trying to really keep market share, because it's really not inventing a better mousetrap in the envelope business. It's trying to somehow, you're not going to sell on price. That doesn't really make sense, and that's going to not necessarily drive a profitable business. But how can you make something that doesn't really have a USP, unique selling proposition, like an envelope? Let's assume for the purposes of this discussion that most envelopes are of similar quality, at least in the business world. So Harvey looked at the struggling business and he purchased it, and he brought in, how did he make that envelope company successful? So he looked at his sales team and he said, what's going to make us successful is how we differentiate ourselves as people, because our product is very similar to that of our competitors. And how we're going to differentiate ourselves as salespeople to get people to invest. Remember, it's a current ongoing theme in at least my philosophy of sales, that we're never selling anything. We're creating a situation to try and influence a buyer who needs our product, who needs our service, to want to buy that and buy it repeatedly so that we can develop a lifelong partnership, friendship, and relationship that potentially starts to evolve around a goods or service, but could be quite personal. So what he does turns out to be something that at least I find was brilliant. This book takes you through, it's 2-page chapters, so it's great. It just gives you all these little tips and anecdotes. And I'm going to try and encapsulate this here in the next 14 minutes. So I better move quickly. So we developed something called the McKay 66 customer profile. I'd encourage you to go on the internet, which didn't exist when this book was written, and download what that is. And the McKay 66 customer profile was an attempt decades ago that's as relevant today as any time of developing a cheat sheet, if you will. I hate to use the word cheat, but an information sheet, let's call it that, about each and every one of your customers. And it would make sense that if you compiled this information, mind you, there's no internet at this time, about each and every one of your customers, I bet you I can prove that if you did this, you too will say, wow, if I had this amount of information or even close to it about any one of my customers, how much could I increase my business? Well, the information Harvey's suggesting you get, I'll break it down into categories: customer information, names, nicknames, birthdays, company address, business phone, home phone, birth date, hometown, where were they born, height and weight. I know in the world of in our political world or whatnot. Now, remember, this book was written decades ago. Some of these things may seem inappropriate or whatnot, but again, just go with the theme of learning about people and being genuinely interested in them, just like we've learned at Dale Carnegie. Educational information: where did they go to high school? Where did they go to college? What sports did they play? Were they in a fraternity? Were they in a sorority? What extracurricular activities did they do? Were they in the military? Families information: did they have a spouse? What is the spouse's name? What does he or she do? What do they do? What's their education? When might be their anniversary? Do they have children? What are their names? What are their ages? What are they passionate about? Business background: where did they work before? Where was that? Where's the location? What was their title? How long did they stay there? When you visit them in their office, are there status symbols in their office that you could potentially resonate with? Are they members of any organizations? What's their relationship to their current company? And then key questions: what do you feel is their long-range business objective? What do you think is of greatest concern to them, both personally and professionally? What special interests may they have? This is, I think, a danger area of politics, religion, and potentially highly confidential, sensitive information. Are they divorced? Are they a member of AA? What subjects are outside of business does the customer have strong, passionate feelings about, whether they're positive or negative? On to lifestyle: any sort of, does the customer like to drink? Back in the day, did the customer smoke? Do they object to either of those? What are their hobbies? What are their vacation habits? Spectator sports: do they own a car? What kind of car? What do you think they're most proud of achieving? What moral or ethical considerations are involved when you work with the customer? What do you think their key problems are? And I'll give you a question when I get to the anecdote when we go through. So that being said, I'm just going to touch on a few of those because otherwise we'd be here all night and all day with you listening to me. So I just want to tell a couple little anecdotes. So let's talk about their name. Did you ever have a customer, let's call them a Mike or a Michael, introduce themselves or have both names on their signature and you weren't sure which to call them? And often people say, call me, they don't tell you what to call them. Mike or Michael, doesn't matter. Well, guess what? It probably does, because their parents gave them a name and they probably been called one name by the most important people in their life. So how might you go about that? Well, hey, someone says, hey, I'm Mike. Michael, call me whatever. I say, well, actually, can I ask you another question? Which do you prefer? No, it doesn't really matter. Next question I've personally asked is, well, what are the people that you trust and care about the most? What do they call you? And they'll give you the answer most times. And you call them and say, Would it be okay if I called you that? Ding, right? You've made that connection. Makes sense. Birthday. It is their most important day, whether people say I don't care about it or not. I just got done watching a new show. I forget what it's called with Marisa, and they put up a factoid and they said 18 million people, at least 18 million of people in the world or the country have the same birthday as you. That is the most important day of a year to any one person. And many people may say, actually, it's not, I don't care or whatnot. But I'm telling you that if you can acknowledge that and you can be the person that acknowledges their birthday, and I'll give you a little anecdote. I developed this game many, many years ago, and everything I've actually put into play, I've learned from someone else. So I don't want to take all the credit for that. But it was the little game that we did is we would go see all our clients. And it was back in the days when you handed out business cards and you would say, hey, I'll make the name Jane Smith. Jane, such a great meeting today. I really appreciate your time. We have the follow-up points that you want to do. I would do a Carnegie close and say, if we can do the following follow-up points that we talked about today, it sounds like we're going to do business, right? And try and get the nod. Well, at the end, when they gave me their business card, or I gave them mine, I would say, Jane, we're actually doing a little contest in our office, or I'm doing a little contest with myself, in that the person this month, the sales rep who comes back with the most business cards, will win a prize. But the person who comes back with the most business cards with someone's birthday on it, they'll win an extra special prize. And let me tell you, during that year, when I did that, probably asked about 200 people for their birthdays. I can tell you in all honesty, 199 of them gave me their birthdays. Only one person, for some reason, gave me a hard time about it. So what would I do with that birthday? I would bring it back to my office and I would plug it in the database CRM system we had at the time called ACT. And I would mark their birthday, the day itself, and I would mark on my calendar also a date 5 days before and the day before. 5 days before, if you would see my desk right now, you would see hundreds of blank cards for birthdays, thank you cards, stylish cards, whatnot. 5 days before, I write you a birthday card. I send that in the mail. The night before, I schedule my alarm to wake up early, this is in the days of landlines, and leave you a poorly sung birthday message, very humbly wishing you a happy birthday to start that day. And I can say, because I meant it from my heart, and then see the sirens are going off already saying, this is a hot point, this is a hot point in the turnaround artist, that it meant the world to that person. And I would hear about it for years and years and years. And I still have many of those birthdays today. I wish I had 1,000 for the people that I know, but I only have several hundreds. But just another great tip to do. Basic things you're going to hear. Sports. What sports do they like to play? Where did they go to college, so that you can follow that sports team and in fact root for them as they head into, let's say, the NCAA tournament and track them on there. Again, sometimes what I call angle selling. Just give a reason to give as opposed to take. Don't ask for an appointment. Give them some information. Hey, John, it was great to see the Wisconsin Badgers get into the NCAA rounds into the Final Four. My daughter goes to Wisconsin. Go Badgers, and make that point with them. Are there status symbols in their office? Look around when you actually go see someone and see what might be in there. And one drill I used to love to do is you look at all this information. I'm not going to get into too many points because I'm trying to keep these episodes at around 25 minutes. But back in the day before the internet, the only ways you could gain this information was to get to know their assistant, as it was called then, a secretary, a man or a woman, an office manager on their floor, where you could politely ask some things about the prospect or client that you were going to go see, and or their office itself. That was so powerful to look around their office, to see plaques, diplomas, pictures they had taken with celebrities, anything you could do, and try and have this powerful memory where as you were talking to them, of course, you're myopically focused on the conversation, but you're also focused on what is around them, what does this person really care about, and then write that in your notes after the call. Today, and when I used to coach a very large sales team, people learned quickly. I had my own version of the K66. And because we had the internet, before any sales reps would come into my office to talk about a sales call that was upcoming, I would say, oh, please have a seat. Why don't you take this next 5 minutes and tell me about who we're seeing, how their company's doing, what we're offering, and what do you really want to get out of this call? And oftentimes, when that younger seller was perhaps unprepared or hadn't been mentored by somebody, as I had always had the good fortune, they wouldn't know the answers to those questions. And my little lesson there was I would have had preloaded, especially for the younger, really rising talents that we had in our system. Shout out to so many people at Video Egg and Same Media that I had the pleasure of working with. I would turn around my large screen and I would have open that person's LinkedIn profile, Facebook profile, now Instagram profile, YouTube, having searched for any video content they might have been in. If they had their own website, there was something they were passionate about, a professional photographer I found once, and any forms of things on the internet, because it's public information. I'm not being a stalker. They have put this information out there. Guess why? Because they want somebody to know about them. That's why they put it out there. So how can you develop this profile that Harvey McKay did without the internet now that you have this incredible resource that's available to you? So make the most of it. Spend those extra 5, 10, 15 minutes the night before. I have some client meetings tomorrow. After this recording, I'm going to spend some time learning about those clients. And I guarantee you, in the 5 to 10 minutes I'll spend on each person, I will learn something that I will attempt to use in a very authentic way during the conversation to try and steer something towards a personal touch point that will hyper develop or accelerate our relationship on a more personal level, so that they feel comfortable with me, so that they trust me, and I'd be somebody they like to do business with. It's really, really powerful. These aren't magic tricks. In Dale Carnegie's book is Become Genuinely Interested in Other People, right? This is not magic stuff. This is not being a used car salesperson. Total respect to used car salespeople. They get a bad rap. But do the homework. Do the homework. Master of the obvious, as much as this is, when I get to the special interest sections, I'm trying to wind this down a little bit. The basics, politically active, may be great to know, never an area you want to talk about. Religion, never an area you want to talk about. And are there other highly confidential or sensitive items not to be discussed? I'll tell you one story where we were hiring a sales rep at a company, and this young man made it to the final round, and he sent, with best intentions, a man I was working for at the time, he sent him a very special bottle of whiskey. That sounds good, except the gentleman who he sent it to was not a drinker, and in fact had really never been a drinker. So he didn't get that job. And some might say, well, that was unfair. How could he know? Well, the answer is he should have figured it out. Or if he couldn't figure it out, try not to make those assumptions, because it did cost him a job. And the point is that he hadn't been thoughtful enough to say there's probably a better gift that has no danger of being taken in some way that might be uncomfortable for the person who's receiving it. So just take that extra little time. And I found out, so one anecdote I found out one time by just doing a little homework was that one of my clients was really fascinated in the early stages of drones, of being a drone pilot. And he actually got jobs photographing weddings and real estate before that was even a big thing. So when I got in to see him, we started talking about a whole bunch of other things. And I was telling him I was in a band, that played a lot of weddings. And he said, wow, that's true. What a coincidence. I actually developed a skill to be a drone pilot and photograph weddings. Perhaps we could team up on some of the gigs that you get. Wow, what a touch point. We didn't talk about business for the rest of the meeting. We got an insertion order about within a month, because this gentleman had taken such an interest in us and in him, and we had a resonant touch point that we bonded in a very significant way than if I had just been trying to sell whatever products or wares. So I want to wrap this up. I know this is a rapid fire episode, but I'd encourage you to do your homework. look on for the McKay 66, see what that means to you, spend the time doing the work. It's a labor of love because these are lifelong relationships you could begin, not just in sales, but in life. I'll tell you, I asked Marisa before we went on our first date what her favorite color was, and a very specific question where, because we're both big fitness people, if she could only do one sport for the rest of her life, what would it be? And we both had to show up to that first date with that information. I'd also found out her favorite color was blue. So when I went to that first date, I tried to guess what her sport was, and truth be told, I didn't get it right, and it was swimming. Duh, should have thought about that because she loved the color blue, and I knew she loved water. But at the end of the date, when I walked her home and I gave her a kiss on the cheek, because the date had went so well and I was anticipating so well, I gave her a gift bag. And anyone who's dealt with Brian McFarland in this world of sales and personal knows that I just love to bring things. My aunt taught me that. My mom taught me that. Always be giving and want to give. And I took out a small white paper bag, and inside was a note telling her how much I had enjoyed our date. And it was written with a blue pencil, and that blue pencil was in the bag. And 2 years later, after celebrating our anniversary, I can't help but think that was something that was really special to us both and made her understand how much my care for her was truly authentic. So I thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of this. I'm going to close up this first with the 66th question of Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. This is the home run that tells you why you may want to do this. Does your competition have better answers to the above 65 questions than you have? Master of the Obvious says, whoever has the most answers, the best quality answers to the 65 questions that we've just sort of went through, will probably be getting more business.
Hey, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Owning the Goal, because success in sales is success in life. We're always looking for guests, so please email me at brian@owningthegoal.com. And we've also got our website up, owningthegoal.com. Go check it out and enjoy all the content there. Till next time, we look forward to hearing about your sales success.